Hi, welcome to Emergency Medical Services. My name is Kevin Copald, and I am an Emergency Medical Services instructor. And if you're watching this video, you're probably enrolled in an EMT course, and this video is designed to enhance your learning and your success in an EMT course. This video, How to Study to be an Emergency Medical Technician, is going to tell you a little bit about how you learn and how you think, to just kind of review for you about different ways that your brain processes information. What this might do for you is help you to learn as you go through the EMT course. It also is going to discuss ways that EMS is taught that might be different from other types of teaching that has been given to you over the years. There are a few aspects of learning to be an EMT that are pretty different from other ways of learning. This video is meant to be a supplement to the National Registry of Emergency Medical Technicians course. If you're taking the course, this video is a good addition to watch before or during the class. At the end of this module, students will be able to understand and explain how they as an individual learn and how their learning may differ from others. You'll also be able to adjust study habits accordingly and to use those adjustments to study more effectively and more efficiently. Hopefully, all of this knowledge will help improve your overall chances at becoming an emergency medical technician. Now I know what you're thinking, wait a second. Why do I need to know how I learn or how I think? Well, that's an excellent question. That's because different types of material require different types of study methods. People all learn differently, and learning about learning can actually enhance learning. Learning how you think is also important in emergency medical services because it can make you more productive. It can increase your achievement as you get through the class. It can make you more creative, which will in turn enable your thinking processes to become faster and easier for you as you become an EMT. It can improve your problem-solving skills, which we use on a daily basis in the world of emergency medical services. It can allow you to make better decisions, and it can allow you to learn more effectively. When we're learning EMS, we're learning about anatomy, physiology, biology, chemistry, physics, logic, and critical thinking. That's a lot to be thrown at you at the same time, all at once, in a relatively small time frame. This can cause you to be frustrated, overwhelmed, or unhappy. And all of these feelings while you're trying to study and trying to do well in the class can eventually just make you crazy. And eventually, you may quit the course. And while a lot of people think that most of EMS is all physical skills, hands-on skills, there are quite a bit of thinking skills involved. And the more you enhance your thinking skills, the more tools you are putting into your toolbox, into your brain. If you think about the things that you know how to think about, or the things you know how to do, they're like having tools in your toolbox. The more tools you have, the more work you can get done. Therefore, the more thinking skills you have, the better your thinking will be. The idea behind this is to put as many tools as we can into your brain to enhance your abilities as an EMT when you finally make it out on a truck. Preparing for a successful course means building your toolbox, putting as many skills as you can in your brain as you move through the course and move yourself to eventually become an EMT. So how do you learn best? One way that we look at learning, and there are many ways of looking at it, and this is just one, is what we call the VARK. VARK is an acronym that describes 4 different learning types. Visual learning, which is things you see, is how you learn. Auditory is you hear things or say things, and that helps you learn. Read, write means you have to write things down. In some cases, you write them down and interpret them in your own language, and that is what helps you learn. And then kinesthetic. A lot of people say that about themselves, that they learn by doing, and they do a better job if they could just sit down and do whatever it is I need to learn. If you're a visual learner, you typically learn through seeing and reading. You prefer written directions, you're probably a good reader, and you prefer the use of images or diagrams or charts and different graphics to understand new information. You use flashcards and highlighting when you study, and you might even write outlines and sometimes will even draw pictures or symbols to remember things. If you're an auditory learner, you learn best by listening to directions or lectures and speaking in situations like group discussions. You use repetition as a study technique and you benefit from mnemonic devices. You prefer to study in groups, reciting aloud, and you probably use flashcards or even teach others what you have learned in those group discussions. You might play music in the background while you study. And for you, you remember the best once you've seen it and then you hear it. If you're a read-write learner, you learn through words. You take a lot of notes, you write down lists and mnemonics, and you're able to translate abstract concepts into words and essays. You read or review your notes to study. You rewrite ideas and principles into other words. You organize diagrams and graphs into statements. And you practice with multiple choice questions. If you're a kinesthetic learner, you best learn through tactile representations of information. You're what most people refer to, and you might refer to yourself as a hands-on learner. You like to figure things out by understanding how they work, and you like to build things or create things. You may walk around while you're reading or studying, sort of pace in the room, and you learn best from going through the motions of a skill or task. What's important to keep It is also important to realize that while you might be a visual learner, an auditory learner, a read-write learner, or a kinesthetic learner, it is possible that you could be a little of each, a little of two or three of them. It's possible that you could be a kinesthetic and a visual learner, or an auditory and a visual learner. But what's important about that is to understand what you are more than one over the other. Many times when you are trying to figure out what kind of learner you are, it also depends on what the subject matter is. For some people, biology and anatomy is a visual thing, whereas for others it's an auditory thing. And then if, for instance, you wanted to do a skill like changing the oil in a car, you are more of a kinesthetic learner than you are a visual learner. So it kind of depends on the subject matter, and it depends on how much experience you've had with the thing you're trying to learn. For those of you who are interested, you can go take the VARK survey. If you go to www.vark-learn.com, you can take a survey about your learning styles, and this website will pretty much tell you what kind of a learner you are in the VARK learning styles. Next, we're going to talk about how do you think? How does your brain process information? There are many different ways of looking at it. The brain is a very complex computer, and there's a lot of different ways that your brain processes information. But for this video, we're going to go over just basically two overall views of how the brain processes information. The first way we're going to look at it is the left brain versus the right brain. If you're a left brain person, you're logical and you're sequential, and you like things in lists and numbers. You're analytical, and you look at the parts of things. If you're right brain, you're more creative and you like randomness and intuitiveness. You sort of just think in synthesizing ways and look at things as wholes. You look at the big picture. This slide is an excellent representation of the differences between the left brain and the right brain. The left brain is more academic and the right brain is more creative. As you read over this illustration, what you'll find is that there's a few things that probably resonate with what you do and how you think. Whether you're good at math and science, or whether you use logic or you need facts, you only deal in past and present, you know objects by name, and you're safe or cautious. Whereas if you're the right brain, you might be big picture oriented. You might use feelings and imaginations and images and symbols, and you're more of an adventurous or carefree risk taker. Next, we look at the global learner versus the analytic learner. These are very similar to the left brain and the right brain, And in some cases, the global brain versus the analytic brain, they kind of go hand in hand in some respect. A lot of times, what you'll see is how they sort of coincide with each other as we go through the details. So, the global learner, kind of more like a right brain person. They're looking at things from an overall perspective and they synthesize information into the big picture. You're spontaneous and intuitive. You like cooperative learning strategies that work well for you. And you need information to be presented in an interesting manner that uses attractive materials. You like shiny things. On the other hand is the analytic learner. They like numbers and logic, and they like things in order. You're a planner, and you need your work organized. You focus on details that are logical. And you prefer to work alone in activities. And if you're an analytic learner, some of you actually notice that the numbers on the page are numbers instead of bullet points. So how do you use all of this thinking to start thinking? One of the ways we learn to think in emergency medical services is hypothetical situational thinking. What if? Just putting in your head, what are all the reasons that something can happen? The more you talk to yourself about hypothetical thinking, the better you're going to exercise your brain and be ready for problem solving that comes up in all different aspects of emergency medical services. What are all the reasons someone can fall off of a ladder, for example? There are many reasons people can fall off of a ladder, and you don't really need any emergency medical services to think about this question, right? There's all kinds of them. There's thousands of reasons. But the more that you come up with in your head, the more you think about what are all the reasons that someone can fall off of a ladder, the more you're picturing someone that needs your help who's fallen from a ladder. You get to the scene or you get to the accident, and you're pretty ready for what has occurred at the scene because you've kind of already imagined everything you would do in all of the situations it could be. Many times, hypothetical situational thinking is just thinking about thinking. It's mental preparation. All of the scenarios that you can create in your head that will devise other plans on how you will handle those situations. It increases the amount of responses you have in your toolbox, and it allows your brain to practice making complex decisions. The more you use hypothetical situational thinking, the more you'll be prepared for the things you come up with and the questions you get asked when you're trying to think about emergency medical services. Another thing that we have in emergency medical services that is to prepare you for real life thinking is something that we call the red herring. Now, if you look at this slide, what we realize is that I'm not talking about some salty fish that's slow smoked and is a dark brown color. I'm talking about the second definition, something that distracts attention from the real issue. This is a big deal in learning emergency medical services, and in fact, it's one of the biggest things students have trouble with in trying to learn how to become an EMT and answer the questions effectively. So what we have to remember when we're getting asked questions in emergency medical services testing and when we're trying to learn how to think like an EMT, we have to remember that in the questions that you're going to get asked, there are a best answer and then there are good answers. What you have to ask yourself is, how does this information help me in the current problem that I am trying to solve? What is it going to do for me and move me forward to the next part of the equation? So as you're thinking about each detail in the questions and in the possible answers, you want to try to figure out, how do I go to the next question? So let's take a look at an example of a scenario-based question that uses red herrings in it that might throw you off. The question or the scenario has a lot of detail in it that might seem like it's information that is helpful or useful or important. And in reality, it really isn't. It's just a lot of information about the scene around you and about the conversation you're having. But none of the information really moves you forward in the conversation except for one piece of the information, which is how you should think about it. So the example here, a friend of yours asks you to come over on a Saturday morning about 9 a.m. to help move a couch from one room to another. He says the couch isn't that heavy, and it should not take more than an hour to move the couch. The friend tells you that he bought a new couch from a half-price sale and that the salesperson gave him free delivery, but he has to have the old couch moved before the delivery truck gets there. He's going to have bagels and coffee at his house, so you do not need to stop on your way over. You'd like to help your friend, but you have a question before you can agree to help him. So in this example, there was a lot of information presented to us. There's a lot of details that we have to think about as we're discussing with our friend whether or not we can help him move his couch. But as you think about those details, you have to ask, what is the most valuable piece of information you'll need to uncover before you can agree to help your friend? What color is the couch? How far apart are the rooms? How heavy is not that heavy? And what kind of bagels will he be serving? Well, all of these questions are part of the information that was in the example given. But when we really think about it, we want to try to figure out which one of these answers is the best. There's good answers, there's great answers, and there's answers that really don't mean much, right? So which answer is it? How heavy is not that heavy? Well, why is that the answer? Well, answer A, what color is the couch? It's polite and it's friendly, but it really doesn't help you make your decision of whether or not you can come help move the couch. It just is something that's conversational, and it's a nice thing to ask if you're curious. How far apart are the rooms? Certainly, this is going to be part of the conversation later on. It's an important part of the task, of course, but are we there yet? Not really. We haven't really decided yet if we can even lift this couch. So this is definitely a good question, but it's going to be important later on in the conversation. And then finally, what kind of bagels will he be serving? Well, while that was something that he mentioned in the conversation we had earlier as he was asking you to come move the couch, and possibly it might be a detail that's on your mind at the time, especially if you're hungry during the conversation, it doesn't really provide any information as to how the couch will be moved, or even if you are able to move the couch. Why letter C is the best answer. How heavy is not that heavy? This is the right answer because if you can't lift the couch, everything else in the conversation doesn't work. Therefore, you must answer this before we can agree to the task. Finally, one of the last, most difficult parts of learning EMS is a style of learning that we use called role play learning. Role play learning is a learning method that utilizes simulation and acting for learning. This technique is used in the learning process of hands-on skills training to provide participation and involvement in the learning process. Basically, it's acting with others and pretending to be an EMT with people who are pretending to be a victim so that you can put yourself in the mindset of an EMT while you're thinking on how to solve a problem. The hard part about role play is you have to be bad at it before you can be good, and that trying and failing are the only way to do well. The good thing about role play is that if you can get your head into role playing well, after about 30 seconds to a minute, you actually become and behave like the person you would actually be in the situation. Therefore, role play is an excellent way to learn. And while some people still don't like it or aren't comfortable with it, one of the things you might keep in mind is that when you listen to someone telling you about how to do something, you get about 5% of that information in your head. Reading about it, you'll retain about 10% of that information. And if you discuss it with your classmates, you can retain about 50% of what's being said or ways that you might handle a situation. But actually doing hands-on role play and practicing a skill can relate to about 75% of learning what's being presented to you. Historically, in role play, the more you talk, the better you will do. Participation will pay you back. The more you participate in role play, the more you will learn because the more you have seen yourself in that situation. EMT class can be difficult. It's a lot of information in a short amount of time. but you will get out of it what you put into it. The harder you study and the more you keep up with your reading, the better you will do. So keep reading, keep studying, and keep learning, and be the best you can be. Thanks for your time.